In 1812, the physiologist César-Julien-Jean Legallois, pardon my French, published a paper where he considered the possibility of keeping a severed head alive through the use of blood transfusion. Legallois was no doubt inspired by the French Revolution he had just lived through, because, as a Federalist, the guillotine was always a looming threat, especially during the Reign of Terror. It's quite macabre and horrible, but the widespread use of the guillotine led to reports of severed heads remaining visibly responsive to stimuli for several minutes after decapitation. And so, with the publication of Legallois' paper, the so-called isolated brain theory emerged as a legitimate scientific possibility. I can find no evidence that she was directly inspired by Legallois, but the very learned Mary Godwin had probably heard of his work by 1818, when she wrote Frankenstein and gave birth to modern science fiction. Ever since then, both science and science fiction have had a weird fascination with the subject of an isolated brain, of how much physical form we really need to be considered alive. As a consequence, experiments too grisly to discuss have appeared both in fiction and uncomfortably in the real world. When science fiction cinema came of age in the 1950s, it was therefore inevitable that we'd get to see such experiments on the big screen.
After a terrible car accident, the audacious and ethically challenged surgeon, Dr. Bill Courtner, is keeping his fiancée Jan alive, despite the fact that all she has left is a decapitated head. The mad doctor has been running illegal experiments with amputated limbs, convinced that he has unlocked the secret to grafting mismatched body parts together with a miraculous serum. As his faithful accomplice and experimental test subject, Kurt, keeps an eye on Jan's resurrected and disembodied form, Dr. Courtner prowls the streets in search of a new body. Meanwhile, locked away in a basement closet, the end result of the doctor's many failed experiments grows stronger and starts to respond to Jan's desperate cries for help.
The massive sci-fi boom of the 1950s came with aftershocks in the form of early exploitation films, low-budget genre flicks that tended to put sensationalism ahead of actual filmmaking. While exploitation films can trace their roots all the way to the 1920s, the 50s is where they started to gain real prominence as B-pictures, cheap films that could be used for double billing or as drive-in movies. As the major studios lost their stranglehold over the theater industry following the Paramount Consent Decree in 1948, the market was rife for independent producers to sweep in and make a quick buck. One such producer was Rex Carlton, who had worked on a few indie B-movies you've never heard of, movies like Guilty Bystander and Josette from New Orleans. He and a man named Joseph Green came up with a story for a sci-fi horror called The Black Door, which Green turned into a full screenplay that he would direct himself. Rex Carlton Productions only made one other movie, 1961's The Devil's Hand, and Carlton later took his own life in 1968, allegedly because he owed money to the mob. As for Green, he would later run the micro-company Joseph Green Pictures, which distributed foreign films and kung fu flicks. But in 1959, the pair got to work without much money on The Black Door, which Carlton wanted to name I Was a Teenage Brain Surgeon, but would eventually be retitled to The Brain That Wouldn't Die. This episode was voted on by my patrons. If you'd like to vote on future topics and get early access to videos like this one, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member. It's been a constant struggle to earn money through YouTube with its flawed copyright policies and tight age restriction guidelines, and your contributions are what keep this channel going and keep my wife from making me find a new hobby. I'd like to quickly shout out my $8 androids: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Don Quixote, Giffen Chumley DDF, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spoats, TV Schromick, and Warren Davis. Thank you so much for your support. The cast for The Brain That Wouldn't Die was made up mostly of low-rate television actors out of New York. For the male lead of Dr. Bill Courtner, they cast Herb Evers, who would later change his name to Jason Evers. Fans of this channel might recognize him for his small role in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. The true star of the movie, though, is Virginia Leith, who plays Dr. Courtner's fiancée, the ill-fated Jan. Leith had other credits to her name, including On the Threshold of Space, A Kiss Before Dying, and Stanley Kubrick's Fear and Desire, and she gives an admirable performance here, given that she is forced to whisper most of her dialogue and is deprived of body language.
Like all quantities, horror has its ultimate, and I'm that.
Yes, before you ask, Jan can indeed speak, even though she doesn't have lungs. Don't question it. Leith hated the film and refused to come back for additional dialogue. In her stead, Doris Brent, who plays this nurse and also gets a writing credit for additional dialogue, recorded a few extra lines. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure Jan's maniacal laughter is Brent's voice, not Leith's. Leith got married to Hee Haw's Don Herron and would quit acting for over a decade following The Brain That Wouldn't Die. The Frankenstein-esque monster seen in the final act is played by sideshow staple Eddie Carmel, who stood at 7 feet 3 inches, though that height was often exaggerated for publicity. Carmel led an interesting life, which included stand-up comedy and forming a rock and roll band called Frankenstein and the Brain Surgeons, but due to complications from his gigantism, he only lived to the age of 36. The only other actors of any note are Bruce Kerr as the beauty contest MC, Vegas showgirl Marilyn Hanold as Peggy, and the Jerry Lewis imitator and co-star of Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla, Sammy Petrillo, as this photographer. The movie was filmed in just 13 days in Tarrytown, New York. The sets were made in a hotel basement, though I can't for the life of me imagine why a hotel would be okay with the whole setting stuff on fire thing. The most expensive props were probably this convertible 1959 Mercury Park Lane, which they couldn't afford to wreck on screen, and this 1959 Ford Fairlane 500 Galaxy Sunliner. Surgeons do make all the good money, don't they? The movie was completed in 1959, but Carlton and Green had failed to get any distributors on board and were unable to release it until 1962, when American International Pictures would pick it up. There was some confusion over the title, whether it was The Brain That Wouldn't Die or The Head That Wouldn't Die, and the movie itself has cards for both. It was featured on a few double billings, most notably with Invasion of the Star Creatures, and there was a European print that had an alternate nude version of the photography session that is clearly too scandalous for YouTube. Critics predictably hated it, and it made a stir due to its gore effects during the climax, but it nevertheless did amazing business for a B-picture. For example, on its opening weekend in early May of 1962, it reportedly made $25,000 at one Kansas City drive-in, which, by itself, judging by the quality of the film, probably covered a good portion of its production costs, if not all of it. Due to a paperwork mistake, the movie was never properly copyrighted, and thus entered the public domain the moment it was first shown in a theater, which helped it gain traction as a cult classic. Indeed, with its camp sensibilities, exploitative nature, and unintentional comedy, it could be seen as a harbinger of the cult cinema that followed in its wake. Many other films were obviously inspired by it, including Reanimator and Frankenhooker.
Elizabeth.
Want a date?
A pair of musicals were adapted from it in the 2010s, and a Kickstarter-funded remake came out in 2020. It's most famous today, though, because of an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Remember her love for you.
As you can see, folks, no strings, no mirrors.
Can you make of her an...
I'll forego my usual whining about MST3K this time, because that's one of the best episodes and features the moniker Jan in the Pan, which has become so synonymous with the film that people keep editing the movie's Wikipedia and IMDb pages to feature it as the full name of Virginia Leith's character. As I see it, The Brain That Wouldn't Die, like so many other cult films, is the kind of movie that can only be made under the right confluence of events. There's a combination of earnest sincerity and filmmaking ineptitude that can only be achieved by accident, and that's what we have here. It's endlessly entertaining, and there are fragments of a good movie to be found buried beneath the cheese. There are scenes of genuine suspense, and I stand by my assessment that even though nobody else in the movie seems to be utilizing much in the way of acting talent, Virginia Leith puts in an awfully good performance, despite being saddled with pulpy dialogue and no body. I thought about including a section here in which I break down some of the themes of the movie and talk about how it reflects the changing attitudes of the time towards women and how they are treated, and I have no doubt I could make a pretty good case for examining the story under that lens. But I really don't think the filmmakers were going for anything as deep as that, and I always feel a little silly when I get all analytical about something as schlocky as this. But if you want to know more of my thoughts on The Brain That Wouldn't Die, or just want to watch it along with me, I did do a watch-along here on my channel about 3 years ago, linked in the description, where I said the following.
It's hard to take it seriously. I would never do an actual sci-fi classic review of it.
Well, as you can see, times have changed, and here I am changing my mind and reviewing it as a sci-fi classic. What, do you expect me to apologize? And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite isolated brain movie? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when Sandra Bullock will completely lose herself, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
I'll mash you like a bug.
You shouldn't try.
Oh, I'll try all right.
Meow.